Well, I think that I always thought, you know, like my mom and dad, I'd get married. That I thought it would be a marriage that would work. You know, I think Steve and I put a lot of thought into the relationship as we were going along. We always got along well. We enjoyed each other. We, you know, we always had a good time. And as far as what I thought from marriage, I guess I pictured that, you know, we'd get married, we'd have a couple kids, but we'd also have some career, you know, that he'd have his career with IBM and I'd have my career with whatever it was. And I felt like I graduated from business school. I was one of 2 women to graduate from the business school. So I thought it was going to be tough for me, but I figured I'd find my place out there. I thought we'd have a little house somewhere. I really didn't think we'd move around. I thought we'd stay in the Detroit area, you know, close to our families, you know, close to our friends. And none of that worked. None of that happened, really.
Oh, Lord. What are we married? 3 months? And she gets pregnant.
So that was the first shock. I had just started a job. I'd only been working a month. I was scared to death to go home and tell my dad that I was expecting, because I thought he'd say, "Oh my God, I paid for 4 years of college and you only worked a month." But so Stephen, I guess he was my support.
I go, "No." I said, "We don't have a nickel to our name." And she gets pregnant and I'm going, "Oh, I'm so happy."
He says, "Come on, we're going to go tell him." And he dragged me out the door and over to my folks, and he blurted out, "Guess what? Donna's pregnant." And my dad and mom were ecstatic, so it, you know, it made it all right. But I was really kind of nervous about it.
Then the day came where Jeff was going to be born. What a day.
Well, he was early. He was about 2 weeks early. And my sister was visiting, and Steve had an IBM golf outing that day. And he was on the golf course, and needless to say, he had a little bit to drink.
We had a great fun crew. Ah, did I get drunk. Woo! But it was fun. So I come home, and I'm going, "Oh, just show me the bed. That's all I want." And Donna's sister was there. "What are you doing here?" She says, "Donna's in labor." And I go, "What?" "Oh, wake me if anything happens." And I went and laid down.
So he went to bed, and my sister kept saying, "Well, do you think we should go? Do you think we should go?" We had a 45-minute drive to the hospital. "Are you sure we shouldn't go? What? Maybe we should go." And I said, "Cindy, not quite yet. We're not quite ready." So finally, I could feel him getting stronger and stronger, and I said, "Maybe we better wake Steve up."
So we all piled in the car and took off for the hospital.
My sister's in the front seat, or in the back seat, and I'm in the front seat, and she's saying, "Okay, tell me when the next one is. Tell me when the next one is." And I'm thinking, I don't want to think about the next one. Just get me to the hospital.
And we get to the hospital, and they checked her all in and everything. And they get her in the bed, and her contractions stopped. So they said, "Look, we're just going to walk her around and see if everything's okay there." And so she's dilated a little bit, and the labor pains were still a few minutes apart. I don't know, 4 minutes apart, something like that. So they kept her, thank God. And I went into the waiting room, and then I went back in and sat with her for a little while, and then the contractions started coming a little harder. And I'm holding her hand, and I found out that wasn't such a good idea. I mean, she was crushing my knuckles every time she had a contraction. And I go, "Oh, geez." And I learned on the second one, though. I just gave her a finger to hold.
So he stayed there, and labor was 17 hours. It was very painful. He said he thought his hand would never work again from me squeezing it. I remember saying to him, "The next one we adopt." And then all of a sudden, everybody's rushing, and it was like, "Okay, it's time to go."
Oh, that poor woman. Fortunately, this is when they wouldn't let you in the men in the delivery, and thank God, because during delivery, Jeff's heart stopped. And he was already too far down the birth canal, so they basically had to go and rip him out of her to get him out in time to get him to breathe again.
And we didn't know if it was a boy or a girl, but we didn't know back then, so I really wanted girls and he wanted boys, but I was thrilled that he got his boy. And my mom had the satisfaction of going out and jarring him awake to say, "Hey, guess what? You got a son."
I went and took a look at him and I go, oh my God, is that one ugly baby? Jeez, he looks like he went 3 rounds with Muhammad Ali. His nose was all scrunched up, he had scabs all over him and everything. And I go, and he's cleaned up?
I can remember looking at him and thinking, it's just such a miracle. He was the cutest little thing I ever saw. He had platinum blonde hair and big blue eyes, and Steve always said he had a scrunched nose, but I never saw it. I thought he was beautiful from day one. He was tiny. He was only 6 pounds, 7 ounces, which was the same thing I weighed. He changed our lives, you know.
So, fortunately, everything fell into place very quickly, and he turned out to be a beautiful baby, you know, so.
And our life kind of changed at that point because we didn't have much. I was only able to work for maybe 4 or 5 months, and then I had to quit work. We didn't have any money. We lived in an apartment when we first got married, and after a year we moved into low-income housing. I think that were probably the most fun times of our life. I think I always felt that kind of my main thing in life was to be a mom. You know, I don't know, maybe because of my mother, that, you know, it kind of took precedence over the job. It was, you know, Steve didn't want me to go to work, and I wasn't real ready to go back to work. We struggled on one salary just to, you know, but I got to spend the first 4 years of his life with just him. And I think he was a really, I want to say he was a brilliant kid. He was so smart, and he would just, you couldn't get him to absorb enough information. You'd sit down and have a conversation, and it was always, you know, even when he was a baby, he never talked in words. He always talked in sentences. You know, it wasn't mama, dad, it was mama and dad, and, you know. And then when you'd take him to lunch, and you'd sit there with him at lunch, and you'd tell him the flag was at half-mast. Why, Mom? Well, because the president died. How come? You know, and it was always, how come, why, what for, when? And it was, you know, never-ending questions. And he was, you know, 2, 3 years old, and he was, you know, he could say his ABCs, he could read, he could say his numbers, he knew his colors, but it was just, you know, he and we didn't have anything better to do but sit and read books. And I think even today, maybe the reason that he's such an avid reader is because of all the time we spent. And his idea, I laugh today because his idea of pleasure reading is reading textbooks.
Yeah, well, Michelle's lucky to be here. I mean, we tried forever for her. And finally, after 4 years, we ended up with Michelle. And, you know, I was ecstatic. The first one was a boy. I go, all right. You know, the name continues. But they said, okay, this is when you didn't know what the sex was of the child. And so when I found out it was a girl, yeah. And I says, I'm done. I got one of each. Can't get anything else. So Michelle was, she was a real sweetheart. I mean, it's just, she just did everything right as the baby and all this and that. And as an infant, she was not a pretty baby by any means. She was almost butt ugly. But she turned out absolutely gorgeous.
When we first got married, Steve traveled a lot, so I was home with the kids. He worked a lot of hours and then getting his career going. I would say probably the first 5 years of our marriage. And then we moved, he was transferred to Kentucky. He was always there on the weekend, though. I will say that for him, and he was always, you know, if I needed him, he was there. And the kids had anything that was going on, you could guarantee he wouldn't miss a thing. He wouldn't miss a school play, or he wouldn't miss a game, or he wouldn't miss. But he did work a lot of hours.
You know, from the get-go, it's always been about the kids. Our whole life was basically about the kids. And that's just the way we were. And we always made sure that we all ate dinner together, and those were very fun times. I mean, one thing we had in that family was a sense of humor. And so, I mean, dinner was, spent a lot of time laughing and just having fun, that kind of a thing. And that was great, because I think that's really needed in a family, to keep it close and going and communicating, and you don't get too serious about each other and that kind of thing.
I can remember us doing things like playing t-ball. You know, Jeff had t-ball, and going over there, and Jeff smacking, when the first time he first time he even hit the ball, Mom about knocked everybody off the bleachers, because I was so excited. And that, because we get there and we think, okay, 3 down, 3, you know, 3 or 2 outs, 3 to go, 3 balls, or 3 whatever, and Jeff would be up, and we'd say, okay, and we just cross our fingers that he'd do something. But he hit that ball, and I was so excited, and that, you know, and then the alarm went off at the house one day when we're at the t-balls. So I said to Steve, I'll go back and see what's going on, because we could hear it from the house. So I got in the car and I left Grandpa and Michelle and Jeff at the ballpark. And I get home and turned off the alarm. Everything was fine. And then Steve came home with the kids, or with Grandpa and Jeff, I should say. And I said, where's Michelle? He said, oh, you don't have her? And I said, no, you were supposed to have her at the ball field. She was on the swing set. Oh, I forgot. So I said, well, go get her. So thank God he gets in the car and he goes back, and she's sitting there on the swing set crying her little eyes out with the coach. My daddy left me. But she was fine. So anyway, he brought her home.